Now, we're facing increasing pressure externally from our government in Westminster and the devolved administrations here in the UK in the shape of conversion therapy or conversion practices bans. And you've been thinking about this for a while. A lot of Christians are just beginning to wake up to the seriousness of these proposals, which would criminalize the ordinary work of churches in many cases, and even parents in the privacy of their own homes, giving morally directive encouragement to live God's way instead of according to an identity that they claim for themselves. You were involved in an initiative called the Greater Love Declaration. Could you tell us a bit about how that came about and what that consists of?
Yes, certainly. So the Greater Love Declaration, I'll do that in reverse order if you don't mind. The Greater Love Declaration is a statement of classic historic Christian teaching or orthodox Christian teaching on marriage, sex, and identity. And so particularly it's about the goodness of marriage, and particularly why the name Greater Love, because Jesus said, greater love has no one than this, that he lays down his life for his friends. And Christian ethics for how we love one another is all about following in the footsteps of Christ in laying down our lives, in sacrificing ourselves for the good of others. And that is why we care for the poor. We don't expect to get anything back, but we do it because we lay down our lives. That's why we love our enemies. We don't expect to get anything back, but we lay down our lives for them. And that's the basis as to how we're to treat our neighbours, and basically how we're to honour our parents. And all of those things are kind of fed into by this. And so when it comes to the whole question of sex, how are we to love other people? Not by pursuing self-satisfaction, but by saying, I will surrender my own desires for the good of others. And that will mean, number one, the woman I'm married to if I'm a man, or a man if I'm a woman. Number two, the family who results from that union. And actually, number three, the whole of the rest of society. The way to love all around us in the realm of sex is to honour marriage and to say that we'll live chaste lives. We will abstain from sex when it's someone I'm not married to, and I'll be faithful to the person I am married to. So the Christian doctrine of marriage is a wonderfully rich, kind, but beneficial teaching for everyone. Okay, so the Great Love Declaration articulates that and says we believe in marriage for very, very good reasons, and it tries to put that into words, and then to say, and this is non-negotiable, right? And so it's a statement by those who are in Christian pastoral ministry, ministers and other pastoral workers, affirming these things, and saying at the end, and we will not change what we teach, even if we are threatened with the force of law. And that's an important thing, because actually that's an illustration of the same thing, right? We're willing to suffer for doing right because it is what's good to other people, because we're to lay down our lives for other people. So that's what it is. It's deliberately framed so that all Orthodox Christians can sign it. It's intended to be far broader than the circles that most Christians actually move in, because there are people, all sorts of Christians around who are orthodox on the doctrines of the Trinity and the Incarnation and what Christ did at the cross, and who are orthodox on marriage. So it's intended to be very broad in that sense, while being very clear and tight on it. So that's what it is. You asked me what led to it. Well, what led to it was, it's been a general thing rising up in society, this strange dynamic that it's becoming considered evil to believe in marriage. Now, there's lots of reasons why that's happened, but it is happening, and it's happening on quite a broad canvas. So that's been around. But then when the UK Westminster government launched its consultation on what it was then calling conversion therapy, though the language has now shifted to conversion practices. It put out this consultation asking for opinions on it, but it wasn't really opinions. It wasn't opinions on whether they should ban it. It was opinions on how. That was what they were asking for. Now, at this point, you've got to explain. So, conversion therapy, what is that? Right? Most of us say, what is that? The language is designed to make you think of horrific things happening in the 1950s of men from the homosexual underworld, being hauled into police cells and beaten, or or even worse, given electric shocks, or horrific things that were not done by Christians. This was a secular practice, although I think it is true that probably some Christians jumped on the bandwagon, but it wasn't. Anyway, that's what is presented as being, we're going to ban this. Okay. Now, the problem is that I got a copy of this consultation and I read it, and to me and to many others, it became clear immediately that this was a complete Trojan horse. Is that none of that kind of stuff has happened for decades, actually. And instead, what this was aiming at was anyone who disagrees with queer theory. And particularly the language is, if you want to change or suppress someone's what it called sexual orientation or gender identity. Now, what does suppress your sexual orientation mean? Well, given that as Christians we don't even believe in sexual orientation, well, of course I don't want to do that. But of course, what we do want to do is to say to people, that's not who you really are. This is a false view of yourself, and instead you should live according to God's design and God's commands. And there's great blessing in doing so. But of course, that would be interpreted by a law against suppressing as breaking that law, because, you've suppressed the identity. And so what it means in practice is, if a Christian youth worker teaches the kids in the youth group about marriage, and one of them, 10 years later, having grown up, says, actually, I'm gay, and my youth worker tried to suppress my identity, he could bring a charge of breaking that law. Or a Christian parent says to a child, says to his son, you're a boy, you can't become a woman. that can't happen. You shouldn't pretend to be a woman, and you shouldn't do anything that would damage your body to make you try and look more like a woman, even if you can't become one. And that would become a criminal offence to do that. And a Christian minister, in the course of normal pastoral work, meets with, let's say, a married man who says, do you know what, I've found myself really attracted to this man, and I'm thinking of leaving my wife to go with him. And the minister says, brother, you should be faithful to your marriage vows. You need to put this simple desire to death, and you need to be faithful to your wife. Then that would be breaking the law. So in other words, this is squarely aimed at Christians. And the word conversion is deliberately used because it's a Christian word, right? It's squarely aimed at Christians, intending to criminalize the normal teaching of Orthodox Christianity about marriage. That's what it's intended to do. Yes. And so I read this and thought, this is horrific. We have to, as ministers of the gospel, we need to respond somehow. And so we drafted the Greater Love Declaration as a way of trying to do two things. One is to make it clear to government where Christianity stands. And the other is to help Christian ministers and others involved in pastoral work to have confidence to stand firm. So that's what it's for.
Fantastic. And we will link to the Greater Love Declaration alongside this this interview, so that those ministers and even those in the pews who are interested in signing can read and can sign.
If anyone doesn't look at that, it's greaterlove.org.uk.
Fantastic. Thank you, Matthew.